I learned the truth a long time ago.
Being afraid of the dark is what keeps most of us alive.
I'm sorry I had to kick your butt so bad.
Hey, dream on.
You have made me a happy man.
Next, I'll make you a dead one.
Hi, my name is Leo Logan, and this is the Tomb Raider review for NoProof.com. This movie was terrible, and even for a video game movie, falls under quite awful. One of the main focuses of movie adaptations of video games is the visuals, to capture the look and feel of the game. Visually speaking, this movie starts off with a very clean, very simple look to establish a modern day setting, and then it went into sort of a visual overkill once it hits the island with the action sequences, before finally running out of money and delivering an underwhelming conclusion. Therefore, I would say the visuals were inconsistent. Directing, Britta.
If we surrender our individuality to form a faceless regime, how are we any better than them? You're the worst.
There's zero personality to this film, which makes the tonal whiplash feel worse. And somehow the film feels like it's not moving at all, yet it also never stops moving. All of the big moments are telegraphed 10 minutes before they occur. As for the writing, terrible. Everyone thinks they're in a different movie. There's the sidekick who thinks he's in a buddy cop action film. The father who thinks he's in an Oscar bait drama. The family friend who believes she's in a thriller. Only the villain knew the movie he was in. And Alicia Vikander is supposed to bring all of these pieces together, but she only does what the script asked her to do, which sets up a very inconsistent and annoying Lara Croft.
It will be an adventure.
Death is not an adventure.
What did I expect? There was hope for this movie because it was adapting the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot, a game that received strong reviews for its compelling storyline and gritty realism. The game served as an origin story for Lara Croft before she becomes the hero we know. She's untested, she's vulnerable, she's uncomfortable with killing, she's just a young archaeology student stranded on an island. And as we explore the island, we also learn about Lara Croft through flashbacks, which reminds me of the show Lost, or even the movie The Edge, where once a civilian is placed in a hostile environment, you see how their true character emerges to adapt to such a hostile environment. I have not played the game, but as I watched the movie, it definitely felt like a speed run of a game. It moved from plot point to plot point where there was minimal impact from scenes, and that's not good. But video game movies have never been good, and why would Hollywood try to make them better? The biggest complaint about this movie before its release was that Oscar-winning actress Alicia Vikander was miscast because her chest wasn't big enough. How did we get here? Glad I asked. The history of movie adaptations of video games can be broken down into 3 eras. The 90s, or let's see what happens. If a game was peaking, make a movie, but the gaming company made sure to maintain control of the production. For the first movie, Super Mario Brothers, I don't really know how to describe it.
It's Toad?
The creators of Max Headroom were allowed to make their own vision for the film, but by the time the sets were built, the producers stepped in and asked for a lighter and campier tone. From there, production moved to beat 'em up and fighting games. Production companies made sure to only hire first-time directors or directors with limited experience. These stories were easier to adapt since they didn't really have a story. This era finally ended with Wing Commander, where the creator of the game himself decided to direct the film. He previously directed live-action sequences for the game, but the movie turned out to be a flop. The only success from this era would be considered Mortal Kombat, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, not to be confused with Paul Thomas Anderson, director of Boogie Nights.
What? It's always about slapping some girl around or whatever. It's not right. It's not cool. It's just not sexy. I mean, it's not sexy like it should be, Jack.
The 2000s, or the auteur era. Instead of adapting the game storyline, filmmakers were now allowed to write original scripts inspired by the video games. It kicked off big with the first Tomb Raider movie, Lara Croft Tomb Raider, starring Angelina Jolie, who, by the way, was also considered miscast because she couldn't add enough dimension to a character with little backstory who didn't speak. This success was followed up with Resident Evil, and in 2003, Hollywood was buying up video game franchises, which led to either horror action films like Resident Evil, straightforward action films like Lara Croft Tomb Raider, a few fighting game adaptations in between, and whatever Uwe was allowed to make. Watch none of his films. None.
You have no idea how powerful madness can be.
Only the Resident Evil series would emerge successful from this era, creatively controlled by Paul W.S. Anderson. Not to be confused with Paul Thomas Anderson, director of There Will Be Blood.
Louder! I've abandoned my child!
And now we're here, the copy and paste, but make it believable era. It started off with Disney gambling on Prince of Persia. It made a lot of money, but not enough to warrant any sequels. The Resident Evil franchise was still going, but it was being heavily favored in the international market versus domestic market. This would become a trend for video game movies. This also marked the rise of comic book movies into blockbuster events, and studios needed to come up with higher budget projects to compete with Marvel and DC. This meant that original IPs were becoming harder to sell. You needed IPs that already had a built-in fan base. If you own it, try again. Fast and Furious proves cars can sell, so why not Need for Speed? People watch all 3 Hobbit films, so why not Warcraft? But make it grounded, aka super serious, Nolan ×2.
They took everything from me.
Use the cannons in Fell Soul Hold and blast those vile fell bats.
You don't think it's strange that we lost our home when Gul'dan came to power?
I thought I was here to be cured.
Violence is a disease, like cancer.
Others suffer from corrupted wills, their minds poisoned and twisted.
Huh. Was the first game really that boring? And now, Tomb Raider. Keep the ridiculous for the gamers. Spend the rest of the time explaining how it's plausible to the non-gamers. At worst, we'll break even in the international market. I wish good luck to Rampage, Detective Pikachu, and Sonic the Hedgehog. For spoilers, I decided to examine how we can improve movie adaptations of video games. I therefore titled this week's spoiler section, Spoilers of the Lost Art. So how does a movie distinguish itself from a game when games have become so cinematic? Over time, the storytelling in games have evolved to rival that of movies. They've expanded the scope of their worlds. They added a lot more details and adapted a lot of techniques to keep the gamer engaged. Their budgets also improved, so is the CGI in movies that much better than the CGI in video games? And how do you make a movie based on a game clearly inspired by a movie? But how would you make an Uncharted movie which is clearly inspired by Indiana Jones without looking like Indiana Jones? The simple answer is by casting Spider-Man. The longer and tougher answer is rhythm. It makes sense after watching game trailers of Tomb Raider and Rise of the Tomb Raider that the filmmakers were trying to recreate the big moments from these games. But there's a difference between watching and playing. The action sequences felt like quick time events to me. In games it works because it breaks from your usual action. It keeps you engaged. In movies, these sequences are your action, so they can only break from the story you're telling. Build to these moments, or else you create a disjointed flow for the film. Also, use less takes for these sequences. Every time you cut to a different take, the audience has to refocus on what's going on. Quick time events usually keep the camera fixed while everything's happening, so that you stay in the moment. I understand this might be physically impossible for live action filming, which means find another way. Is Lara Croft a superhero or not? Lara Croft doesn't win a lot of fights in this film, which is commendable, but she definitely gets beat up way too much and recovers far too fast. This creates very uninspired action. You either have chase sequences or she's simply getting beat up. These are missed opportunities to show how smart she is, to create tension in the sense of how can she win this battle. She does more than just puzzles. Why so serious? Games have ridiculous elements, so embrace it. Instead of trying to explain the world, just focus on developing the character. And developing Lara Croft should have been priority number 1. Lara Croft starts off tough, confident, and cracking jokes. Then she's angry and distant. Then she's cracking jokes again. Then she's scared. Then she toughens back up. Then she's crying because she just killed someone. Then she's killing multiple people without any remorse. Then she falls back into being a weak character. And then finally goes back to her tough character cracking jokes without any character arc whatsoever. One plot. The movie is essentially part reboot, part remake, and part speedrun. You have a few scenes with this lady named Anna, which is clearly hinting at a sequel or two. Then there's maybe 15 minutes with sidekick Daniel Wu before he has to be sidelined for the rest of the movie. And in between then, you have a few flashbacks of her and her father, which feels jarring until you watch the rest of the film and realize the whole movie is about her and her relationship with her father. So there's about 40 minutes before she actually reaches the island. So now you only have an hour left, which means the villain can only repeat the same 3 lines. Lara Croft has to kill and come to terms with killing. She also has to discover her father, and of course find the tune to raid. This week I recommend the 1997 film The Edge.
So, how are you planning to kill me?
Anthony Hopkins, Alec Baldwin, Michael from Lost, and a bear. Who will survive? Please like, comment, and subscribe below, and also follow No Proof News on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you.
Alright, for start, we'll be good.
George didn't ask for this. They're gonna put him down. That's not happening.
Go to the buildings. Destroy the buildings.